Over the last few years of doing this job, I've developed an appreciation for Honda. They build solidly engineered cars that are good looking and well spec'd and generally good to drive. But over the last 18 months or so, that appreciation has been eroded somewhat by models like the Insight and the Ballade and the Brio. And now we have the new Jazz. This is generation 3 of a car that's particularly popular in South Africa, and with good reason. A solid drive, good versatility, and Honda's top reliability make it a no-brainer, even if the styling wasn't what you'd call cutting edge. In fact, in that particular corner of the market, against the VW Polo, the Renault Clio, and the new Opel Corsa, it was lagging quite far behind. It's now something completely different. It's gone from being a nondescript box to something that is actually quite attractive, with a strong rear end and a particularly nice face. And even though it is recognizable as a Honda, it doesn't just look like a small version of the Civic or the Ballade. It also doesn't just look like a big version of the Brio, which is a good thing, because that would have been disastrous. As it is, it's just right. It may not be as trendy looking as a Renault Clio, but it's certainly more interesting than the VW Polo and more cohesive than the Opel Corsa. Where the previous generation relied on its reputation as a solid little car to get its fans, this one isn't scared to be a little more extrovert and throw a bit of style into the mix. All new styling, bog standard power plant, well, in our test car anyway. There is the option of a 1.2 litre petrol, but we're driving the 1.5 litre petrol carried over from the old generation Jazz without any changes at all. So that means 88 kilowatts, 170 newton meters, and in our test car, a 5-speed manual gearbox. There is a choice across both engines of a CVT gearbox as well, but unless you're really not a fan of changing gears yourself, opt for the manual, even if it is just so you can enjoy the gruff sound of the engine without it being spoiled by the jarring sound of a CVT gearbox constantly trying to find the optimal point in the rev range. So, the Jazz has new styling and a fairly old engine and an interior that's a mix of the two. It is a fresh layout, but it does have some bits borrowed from some other Hondas. So, steering wheel from the Civic, touchscreen from the Accord, which isn't perfect, but still, it is a fairly advanced setup that's got a nice feel to it. The first thing you notice is that the center stack is almost completely button-free. All the major interactions are touch-based. Quite a cool brag for any car, but especially for one at this end of the market. The downside is that the touchability of the infotainment system still isn't quite right, with 2 or 3 button pushes sometimes required to select a function. The rest of the setup works well from a design and materials point of view. There's good space, helped by Honda's Magic Seat system, still one of the smartest loading systems around. The reworked interior also means more space for rear passengers. There are quite a few fairly boring details about the construction of the Jazz. Things like it has a lighter monocoque that's also stiffer. It has a longer wheelbase which helps with directional stability. All of which is just engineering speak for saying Honda have built a car that's now easier to use and generally feels pretty good all the time. It's one of those cars that may not offer much in the way of power or luxury or real involvement, but the Jazz does have something about it that makes it a car you generally enjoy driving every time you drive it. And I suspect that has something to do with an aspect that most good cars get right, and that is a sense of stability. In here, that's a short, sharp gear shift, steering that just always feels right, a very capable chassis, and a power plant that, although it can be noisy, just always feels like it's delivering. And all of that means time spent in the Honda Jazz is generally very enjoyable, besides the touchscreen's frustrating inconsistency. It's a big step forward in terms of styling and interior setup, and even though the 1500 motor may not be as evolved, it still makes for a very good package. The last few Hondas I've driven had shaken my faith in the brand, but the new Jazz has gone a long way to restoring it. It might not be as cool an option as the class-leading Volkswagen Polo or the other upcoming contenders, but it is a good-looking, well-thought-out package that does what it does very well. The 1500 petrol motor has been carried over from the previous generation and offers decent power together with a snappy 5-speed manual. There is also a CVT option. It's kept the best bits of the old version, including the clever magic seat system, and blended them with the new, although not all the new bits work as well as they should.